First thing I'd like to do as we start the interview is just to get your name, the first and last, and the correct spelling of it. So if you give that to me, please.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm Alex Westley, A-L-E-X, Westley, W-E-S-T-L-E-Y.
W-E-S.
T-L-E-Y.
Oh, there's a T in there. Okay. And a lot of people knew you as Rudy, though, as you grew up.
Yeah.
Ah, it's a good. I like Rudy. Now you were a painter, you went through a apprentice as a trainer. I mean, you went through.
I had 2 years of apprentice training, 2 out of 3 years, when the Depression hit in 1929. I was working for a shop that had 300 men working, 5 apprentices, and they laid them all off with 1 apprentice and I think 12 men they had kept. Eventually they went broke. Too much receivables, didn't get them.
How old were you? About?
Well, 1929 I went in, I was just about 18.
So how did you work your way through the Depression to survive?
Well, like I told you, both my brothers were painters at that time. And we always picked up odd jobs, like working out of your hip pocket. And see, the one good thing in Chicago is, even during the Depression, there's always work in your leases. All the apartments, you know. They all lease in May and October, twice a year. So there was always work a couple of months in the spring, a couple of months in the fall, when people moving. And during the summer, we used to do some outside work on these apartment buildings. But there was no building going on or anything. There was big tracts that the banks that took over, you know, they laid empty. Westwood in Chicago, there was over 600 beautiful bungalows. Practically all of them empty. The banks had to take them back.
Wow.
A few of them, you know, there were some men working, you know, like a friend of mine, he was an engineer on the railroad, and he had a corner house, brick house, nice. I think he paid $9,000 for it at that time. So hell, he just gave it back. He would quit making payments on it because he owed more than he could buy the house across the street for. It was the same thing. So, and they laid dormant there for about 2 years. And then the insurance companies or whoever owned them, then they refabbed them and we cleaned them up and done work on them. And then we had the World's Fair. There was some work always on the World's Fair, but that was a WPA project. Well, no, PWA and WPA, there had 2 of them. So union men could work on the job, but we could only make $79 a month. Then somebody else took over your job.
Wow.
That was in 33.
So when did you meet your wife?
That's where I met her. She came down to see the World's Fair from Columbus, Ohio. And she was staying in a hotel where she came down with her girlfriend and the girlfriend's husband. He had a trucking outfit. And they stayed in a hotel. And I used to eat in the restaurant. At that time, I was out of painting work, and I went to work for Ward Baking Company. And I'd go over to the hotel for my supper, because I worked from 2 to 11. And I met her in there. Then she went back, and we wrote back and forth for 2 years. I made 2 trips from Chicago to Columbus. And then 35 we got married. Broke. But we stayed with my folks. They didn't have anything, but with my dad and what I was bringing in, we made it.
And did you start a family right away?
Yeah. First month, I guess. I was married 10 months and I had my daughter.
So here you are struggling through the Depression, and you're
Yeah, well, then I stayed there then until 1941. Things start picking up, you know. I got my own place, and I was, like I said, I was doing real good. We even bought this bar, and it was a real bar. It was built as a bar before the, you know, when they quit the
Prohibition?
Before Prohibition. It was built in 1918 or something, right after the First World War. Had a sidewalk elevator on it and everything. An old man run that thing for years, and he was getting up, he must have been up in his 80s. And all he was running it, and his son was paying the bills on it, because he had run all his customers out. All he had a bunch of old fogies in there, and he'd open whenever he felt like it, and he'd close it. If there was nobody in at 9 o'clock, he'd close it. And his son had quite a bit of money. He had a printing business. He made these maps for the government and other maps too. So the old man was getting too old, and he had to put him in a home. So my oldest brother found out about it, and we could get in it for, didn't cost us anything, because we didn't have anything. All we had to have was enough money to stock it. But we made arrangements that we'd run it for 6 months on the old man's license thing. So we went in Huckleberry Buck and had a big grand opening, and at the end, when the license was due, just before it would come due, I guess, in the state government, everybody come to investigate us. Hell, he wasn't doing $200 worth of business a week. We were doing $2,000 as soon as we took over. And, well, none of those ain't correct figures, I don't remember, but we had a good business from nothing. He'd draw on a keg of beer all week, you know. We'd run a keg and a half a day. And they wanted to know how come. So they finally stuck us for a half a year's license, plus the new license. But because we filed our tax and everything right, and they want to know what the hell happened here. But, well, that's, and then I worked like hell, working on all day long, and then every other night I'd close up. That's one reason I went to California, to do much work. And I got in the studios.
So things were kind of looking up then financially. You're married, you have a daughter,
Oh, yeah.
you made some money,
Oh, yeah.
coming out of the Depression now. And
Oh, yeah. I had a nice, in Chicago, I lived up above the tavern, a 7-room house up there, best flat, and then there was 2 apartments in the back. See, my oldest brother, he got into it. He got a good deal. And he got an option to buy it, which he did later on. But we didn't have any money to buy at that time. Then when I left, I went to California. Then the following year, he bought the whole thing.
I'm gonna. So life sounds pretty good at this point. Moving to California,
Oh yeah, I got
Happily married?
a nice place in California. And I had to go into service.
How did that come about?
Well, I worked about 7 or 8 months in California, and then I got my welcome notice. So I wrote in, not really objecting, but I wanted to know how come, because I had such a high number. And they said, well, it didn't make any difference. I was a California resident as far as they were concerned. So I went in, and you know how they line you up, and they were looking for people, for fellows to go in the Navy or paratroopers. And of course, I'm dumb. I weighed 182 pounds. And he said, anybody under 32 years old and under 185 pounds, I think it was. No, 180 pounds. So I told him, I said, hell, I'm overweight. And he looked at me, he said, no, you only weigh 155. So I got in the paratroopers. And then he sent me to Fort McClellan for my training. And then I was supposed to make my jumps at Fort Benning. And, well, I guess I have to tell you again, I broke 5 ribs on the last week of training. And then they went to the hospital, and when I got through, they shipped me right to England right away. I got there, I had no company or anything. And I thought I was going to go into the gliders, but they were all set to go for the invasion, which I didn't know anything about. So I didn't get into that. They just put me in as a replacement infantryman. And then on the 6th, when they went over, I forget even how, 9 days later, 12 days later, we went over. And we landed on the beach, and of course the beach was all full of army. And the sergeant came up and he wanted some replacements. I don't know, I think 3 or 4 of us went with him. Another sergeant took a couple. Then that's when I first knew that I was in the 35th. And then this was, I don't know, maybe a month after before I knew what outfit I was with. But then we got through Mortaines. That's where we routed the Germans, and they all took off for St. Lo. That was the hub for the Germans. When they started to pull back, they all pulled into St. Lo to hold us up, which they did. But St. Lo took an awful beating. I don't think there was, I don't know exactly, but I couldn't see one building that had 4 walls on it. I mean, we didn't take it, the Air Force just knocked the heck out of it. And when we got there, they had people piled up about 4 high along the road there. A lot of civilians. And some civilians were taking the shoes off the Americans, you know. But of course, we kept right on going through.
Did you usually know where you were going, or were you just
No.
following the troops?
Not when you're on the front line. That's what I didn't like about it. Later on, they said they made me acting sergeant. Then I got some news, from the company of where we were going. no, then when we take off, it was just word of mouth, it would come down to those peons that where we're going. But from there on, we were mostly chasing the Germans. We'd get to, or we got into Alsace-Lorraine. That used to be Germany, The First World War, then the French took it over. And I knew. In other words, what we did know, we were heading for the Saar River. Of course, we were way back then. We'd take a little berg at a time, how they had these little bergs and maybe 12, 14 houses on both sides of the street. And the backyard would take off into a farm area, in pie shapes. The farming area. And see, over there they had the house and the barn and everything was in one building. You go in the front door and the apartment was on this side, and you walk a little further, and then you go through a door, and the barn was on that side of the building. We used to kid about. We knew we were in Germany when the manure pile was in front. The French the French had it in the backyard, and the Germans had it in the front yard. I got it backwards. Germans had it in the backyard, and the French had it in the front yard.
So this was kind of a quaint little borough that you were going through. I mean, they were.
Yeah, they all had names, but I forget them all. Half of them I didn't even know. Sometimes we'd go into them, and maybe there was a machine gun left, and one of them Volkswagen Jeeps, and they'd fire at us, and we come in. Firing stopped. They took off. There's a lot of that.
So did you usually have did the Air Corps come in and bomb before you came through, or were you the first?
They didn't bomb them little places. It was just the infantry would take them. But we saw bombings alongside when we were moving up. Our tanks were being bombed, and we saw when their tanks were going back, we saw a lot of our planes bombing, straight from their tanks. And you'd find see a tank, and in the morning it would be burning. They burn all night, They burn forever.
So, for the little villages that you came, having never been in war, I mean, was it just like you would march downtown Squim? Was it kind of like, here's a town and here the townspeople are?
No, we'd come in from different areas, because we never knew whether we were going to get resistance or not. And like I say, sometimes we got resistance, sometimes, but I never got into any hand-to-hand fighting. I got into these places, where they had just left. Always in one where they were still in town and went up and threw hand grenades in the windows where they were shooting out of and stuff. Then I was in one house shooting out of a window down the street. And I had my helmet off because I got such a short neck, and we were kind of laying down, that damn helmet would fall over. 88 came in and blew the whole damn corner of that building out. And I thought I had it then. I thought I was in heaven. Everything was nice and white. Plaster all coming down, And I had another fellow text with me. And I hollered, you hurt, Tex? He says, no. I said, how are you? I said, I guess I'm all right. He come over then, and I brushed the dust and plaster off of me, and shit, I was full of blood. Some of that cement or whatever it was, hit me on the head, bleeding. I said, I think I'm hit in the head. He looked and he said, oh, hell, you got a hell of a hole in your head. Up to then, I felt pretty good. But they only took me back to the kitchen and got a couple of stitches. But I didn't get no Purple Heart for that.
You probably still could file for it.
Oh.
So when the Germans left the village, the military German left, were there still the local citizens still there, or did the villages just empty
Oh, no,
out?
the citizens were all there. Oh, yeah, see, they occupied all of that part of France, you know. The only open city was Paris. And we never bombed Paris. But that was all the army and everything was in there, the Germans. But when we left Mortaines and we were going to go to Paris, I did know we were going to go to Paris. And we got, just before we got into Paris, of course, I'd never seen Paris. I don't know, maybe we were 20 miles from there. But, you know, the outlining buildings were there. I don't know how long we waited. Till the French army came. Then de Gaulle went in and they took possession of Paris. They got all the credit, you know. But our army was all around it waiting for them to come in and take it. But,
And that sounded a real common experience, that there would be major events like that where they would wait for a general.
oh, it was all in the news. It was in the news. No, anyway, any of American infantrymen was in that area, will tell you that they all got held up.
Huh.
Oh, I imagine some of our officers and stuff went in, you know, doing paperwork and stuff. Getting so the French, if there was, see, I guess from what I read, I didn't know, I could experience. See, a lot of French kind of fell in with the Germans because they all were occupied for quite a while, you know. If you're a good Frenchman, why, and agreed with the Germans, why, they let you alone. Otherwise, they give you a hard time. So you always have that in a war, you know.
Did you, as you went through these little villages, would you stop and set up camp for a while in a village, or were you just...
Oh, yeah. See, and I could talk a little German. Not too much. But I could understand better than I could express myself. And we get in a little town like that, we would stay overnight, and the sergeant always get me, and that was when we got in Alsace-Lorraine, where they all talked German and French. See, and then I'd make arrangements with the people, you know, just walk in and tell them we're going to occupy one room, or it depends on the size or how much room there was. And then we'd camp there. We didn't dig a foxhole every night, you know. There was only few instances. In fact, that was the worst experience I had, was in a damn foxhole. We had a battle in the woods. You know, you don't know who you're fighting. And when that stopped, we continued on. We were still in the woods. It was not got nightfall. So and rain, goddamn rain like hell. So we're going to dig a foxhole, put our shelter half over it. And we were on 50% alert. That's when you sleep and your buddy stays awake for a couple of hours. And we dug the damn foxhole, and it was cold. That was in late October, I think. Yeah. And I stayed awake for 2-3 hours in the dark, and nothing happened. And then I went and laid down. Well, see, we had all our heavy clothes on. All we had was what we had on our back. Remember them old army overcoats? And then you had your what's that other jacket? My mind's going to hell. And then a sweater under that, and your wool shirt, your underwear. And we only dug about that deep, and then we put the stuff around the side, around the sides. And well, I was so damn tired that day, I could hardly walk. And I laid down, and I went to sleep. He was supposed to wake me up in 2 hours, and I was going to take over. But he was just tired as I was. He was sitting there sleeping. And all of a sudden, I woke up, water was up to my mouth, and that damn hole was just that deep, just as deep as I was in it. And loaded with water. And you can believe this or not, but I couldn't get up with my overcoat on. Because it was, that wool soaking that water for a couple hours. I must have weighed 600 pounds. So I got my overcoat off, and then I got up. And all my teeth were just rattling. I was just shaking. So I got my hand around a little tree was right outside the foxhole. I kept running around that tree, trying to get warm. And by God, I went all through that, and I had the overcoat on, it was full of mud. Then we got into the next darn town. I'll never forget that. I was a real old lady. She took that overcoat, and boy, she just brushed all that mud out of it and dried it up. But never changed clothes. I dried it up. But we were wet then all day and all the next day, and I don't know how many days after, because it just rained. That was the worst part of the whole service that I had. Could say I suffered.
Wet and cold and muddy.
Oh, well, just imagine, late October, it was about ready to snow. It hadn't snowed. And that rain was cold.
How did you ever get a change of clothes, or how did you? Because you're not going to be carrying.
I was trying to think of that when I was doing my laundry today. And I knew you were coming, and I was thinking about. I don't know how many. I don't think we went months without changing clothes, except when the Germans made that last push. If you read about it, from when they surrounded Bastogne and made that last push. We were at the Saar River, and I'm getting ahead of my story. About a week before that, a sergeant came up to me and he says, Wes, he said, I think you need a vacation. He said, we're going to send you to Nancy, France for 10 days on a rehab. And 2 other fellows from our outfit, say. So we went to Nancy, France. We went there. We got all new change of clothes and showered, and they took our rifles and cleaned them all up and fixed it all up. And then I got our first good meal. That was Spam. We've been on K rations for weeks. And C rations weren't bad, but we weren't getting any. Well, once in a while, because they'd have to bring them up in 5-gallon jugs, and the Jeep would have to come up. So they said, well, the town is yours, he says. But the only thing we don't, no fights. No fights. He says, bartenders will treat you, you won't have to pay. We went to the bars, like he said, they would take our money. Of course, we didn't have it. Money I had was German money that they had printed for paying off their soldiers in France. But they were taking it. They paid us in it, so they would take it. And I was there 6 days. And all of a sudden they called us, 3 of us, and said, your outfit's coming in the morning. You can join your outfit. And they pulled him back and try to stop that advance that the Germans were making. Of course, there were some of them up there already. In fact, our outfit can't take any credit for stopping it because there was divisions up there in front of us. But we did go through after the Germans left, and we went through one place where, God, they slaughtered the hell out of that was the end of their push, you know. And they caught a whole company, I guess, that were having breakfast. And man, they had they even had their water bags set up and everything. They figured they were going to, that's before the push started. They were going forward. And that's when they got knocked back. They took an awful beating.
When you were on your R&R, and was it Nancy? Is that
Nancy, France.
Did you forget about the war at that time, and it was just like going to?
Well, it was just like going into town, you know. Yeah, I forgot about it. Hell, you didn't have to come back in that night or not. You had your barracks. The only thing they stressed was don't get in a fight. Well, see, I was the older one in our outfit. Some of the younger guys, they screwed up. They went wild and got drunk and everything. But I was more settled. I didn't. I had my drinks and stuff. But there was only the 3 of us from our company. I didn't know anybody else. So we just went out and looked over the girls and stuff.
But was it just like walking into a regular town, or did you?
Yeah.
Still
Yeah.
I mean, the bars open, the restaurants.
Oh,
open?
yeah.
Huh.
Of course, the restaurant didn't have nothing to eat, but of course, a lot of those people, you know, they had a lot of food dug away and hidden. And one place I went, they had flooded an area in front of us, and we were held up. Of course, we actually were held up, maybe 8-10 days. And it got real nice. We had real nice quarters. I went to all through the homes, you know, and I'd set up we'd take room here and a room there. And the one place I stayed, she got a great, big, beautiful ham that they had dug away, you know. I guess they had it there for a year. They were awful good to us that way.
And was that a German family or a French family?
That was in Alsace-Lorraine. I don't know whether they were French or not. They all spoke French. The schools were French. But the older people were all German.
So were they glad to have you there?
Pardon?
Were they glad?
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah, they were all acclimated in France, you know, ever since the First World War.
How about some of the little German villages you went through? Did you stay with some German families?
No, I didn't get to. I went up to Saar River, see, and that was in Alsace-Lorraine. And then we went back. Then we came up and went into Belgium, into Bastogne. See, and that's where we had most of our action. And then, right after we left, after we pretty well got Bastogne back, of course, they fled too, you know, and we were after them. Then on the 15th, that's when I got wounded. But my outfit, then they continue up, and they went up to the Elbe River. I got this after I come out of the hospital and went back to my outfit. And they were 18 miles into Germany, and when they met the Russians, and then signed a pact that we go back to the Elbe River and the Russians would take over that area all the way to Berlin. So the hospital, I had a pretty good time there.
Now, how did you get wounded?
My lieutenant and I were running out of the woods and we were going to get up to a haystack. And more or less scouting, going to see what we could see from the haystack into this other town. It was real close. And we just got to the haystack and the damn 88 come in. And I had my, see, we didn't wear no backpacks. We just had our blankets rolled up and then in the shelter half and our mess gear. And a piece of string on it, and he had it over our shoulder. And when I got hit, knocked me down, and just, you're in kind of a shock, I guess. I picked up my rifle and I picked up this shelter half, and man, it was torn to shreds. Quite a bit of shrapnel hit it. Otherwise, I would have got it all in the back. But I just got one in the elbow. Then they sent me back to the hospital in Belgium. And they put me in a cast from here to here with this arm in the cast and this one was out. And they just, with indelible pencil, wrote on there, amputee in zone of interior. Well, their zone of interior was England, because they weren't taking off any arms or legs in Belgium or France at that time. So I went back and got in that amputee ward. Well, 50 some amputees in one ward. And well, the next day they saw I was moving my fingers, so they x-rayed me right away and they said, hell, we're not going to take it off. But they kept me in that ward because I could get out of bed. And we had a lot of fellows there with, we had one fellow with both legs off, a lot of with one leg off, and quite a few in the arms, And then at night, we had one fellow, he was a son, his folks owned, I don't know if you remember, they had menswear, tie clips and belt buckles and all that, Hickory, they call it Hickory outfit. They were from Chicago too. He had both legs off. He'd been there quite a while. Well, on one leg they started at the ankle and they quit at the knee, and the other one they went way up to the hip. But he had several operations. Gangrene set in, Then they, how they do when they cut your leg off. See, they cut it off at the knee, they cut down here, and they fold the meat back. Then they cut the leg off, then they put the meat back and sew it up. And then they put a clamp on there, and they got we call it a trapeze, just like that, And they hang the rope over that and weights, and that's pulling the meat out from your legs. Otherwise it'll creep up, and you'll be in awful pain. And as long as they can keep that meat till it heals, And some of them fellows not every night, but most every night, they'd holler for me to come over there. See, they'd scoot down in bed, and then the weight would hit the ground, hit the floor. And then that meat would pull up, and they'd wake up and holler. And then I'd go over there and I'd lift the weight, and then they pull them to get themselves up in bed. And I'd let the weight down and pressure on them again. So I stayed in that ward all the time. And hey, we had a lot of fun in that ward. The nurses were good. The officers, we always take turns in buying a bottle, you know. So they had a couple of private rooms in front for if there was an officer or an amputee, they got a private room. Then they had nurse quarters, then they had the kitchen. They didn't do all the cooking in the kitchen. They done it in the big kitchen, and they brought it over to that kitchen. Then every night we'd open a bottle, $18 a bottle. Guys in England would come peddle it. Then I flubbed up there. I was supposed to stay another 2 weeks, but the major was pretty good. I wanted to get a pass. I wanted to get out. And they wouldn't let you out if you had a cast on. But they put me in a small cast so I could get into my uniform. And told me to keep my hand in my pocket, which I did. And I went out and I flubbed up in a tavern there. So the MPs took me back, and so next day they shipped me out of there, back to my outfit.
With the cast still on?
It was cast still on.
Now, did you... It's interesting because, well, I guess two questions. Did you want to go back at this point, or having been wounded,
no,
you've seen enough already?
I got an argument with I was sitting down there with a woman drinking at the bar, and he was a first lieutenant, I think. He come over and started arguing with her. I guess he knew her. And of course, my big mouth, I had something to say, you know. So they just called the MPs and took me in. But when I got back, well, I went to, where the hell was that? Birmingham. There, stayed there about a week. I really didn't know exactly where I was going, because they had shipped my outfit, from what I had heard, over to Japan, over South Pacific. But the regular outfit was still there, the high pointers. No, I'm getting ahead of my story. The whole outfit was still there.
Now, do I remember right? Are you under Patton's?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Saw him one time.
Oh, is that right?
Saw him one time when we crossed the Czar River. He was up there, I guess, with the engineers, and they had these boats that we had to haul. You know, they brought them in trucks, and we had to haul them down to the river. And we could get 10, 12 guys in one of the boats. Damn good boat. A friend of mine's got one here. Put a kicker on it, boy. You can walk all around that thing and it won't tip. Yeah, I saw him.
Was Patton anybody special at that time, or is Patton a person that in history has become Patton?
Oh, yeah, we hated him. We always said, I don't know who started it, but it was our blood and his guts. But we had no connection with him at all. Just the stories we'd hear, you know. Like when he went, I I don't know the way the story went. He went against orders to free his son-in-law or brother-in-law or something that was a prisoner in a German camp there. And hell, he just took right off. And I don't know, outside of that, I don't know nothing about him. In fact, I didn't even know it was a Patton until some guy told me that was who he was.
That's what I was wondering, because in history we always read about it, but it's different when you're really there. It's just average every day, some general. Target practice for the Germans. Now your daughter was how old roughly while you were over there? She was 5, 6, 7?
Well, she was born in she was 7 years old.
Did you get much?
She was 8 when I come out.
Did you get letters from your wife and your daughter?
Huh?
Did you get letters?
Oh yeah.
What was that like? Did they send you pictures or?
No, guy'd come out, mail call, just like they do in MASH, toss out the mail to you. Oh yeah. And that Jewish local I was in, I told you, they send me $15 every month. Until they went on strike. Of course, the war was over when the strike came.
Was that tough having a young daughter at home and a wife at home and to be over in?
Well, my daughter and wife went to her folks' home in Columbus, Ohio. Yeah, and then she got my pay. I think it was $85 a month.
How did you guys? Now it sounded like you were on the move most of the time.
All the time.
In that big, heavy, wet trench coat.
Well, sometimes the Germans would take off so far, they'd bring the trucks up. And maybe the trucks would take us 20, 30 miles with no resistance.
What did you
do? Trucks would go just so far, and then if there was any firing or any shells coming in, they'd stop, and then you'd walk from there.
Did you ever have downtime where you were bored?
Bored?
Yeah.
No, I don't know how you get bored. If you had any time, you went to sleep. No.
Do you remember with?
And sometimes we rode tanks,
So would you ride in them, or you'd ride on the outside?
On the outside. Usually 4 or 5 men on the outside. Till they run into resistance. And when they run into resistance, well, then we'd get underneath the tank. Because we couldn't do nothing. Sometimes at certain times it'd say, well, like I don't know how the hell it worked, but somebody would come up and say, well, you 5 and you 5 tonight will go on a scouting mission, just when it got dark, and see where all this resistance was coming from. And come back, and then the tankers would know how far they were free to go.
So what was that like, going on one of those scouting missions? Did you get sent on one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was on several.
Are you sneaking through the woods or cities or what?
No, you're walking through the woods, or one time we walked, there was an elevated railroad, and we'd be creeping along the side of that railroad when we knew that the opposition was on the other side. But we went to see what we could hear, or because you can hear motors running, or you can hear talking and stuff like that. And of course, one time they sent out a patrol too, and we passed each other. And we had like a little clicker, like used to get in the Cracker Jack boxes, We'd click them every once in a while. because maybe I'd have a buddy alongside of me, just so he could make me out and I could make out him. See? We were walking along, all of a sudden we heard two guys talking in German. Of course, nobody opened up or nothing. We let them go. You know, you and your buddy and some other fellow, a couple more behind you or alongside of you. So you don't open up in something like that because you don't know what the hell they got.
So they went their way. They went to look to see where you guys were.
Yeah, they were going this way. We were going towards their.
So would you then you could hear them when you get
We
close?
could hear them. We couldn't see them.
What about when you found out where they were at and you could hear trucks and things?
Well, we just stopped. We just stopped till we couldn't hear them anymore. Because we didn't have orders to do any hand-to-hand combat or what are you going to shoot at in the dark? Can't shoot at a voice. Then we had one other experience. I had a patrol, and one of our men froze. And he was one of the older fellows that was with the outfit in the States. And I had to stop, take him back. He just froze and shook, and he couldn't go another step.
Out of fear.
Oh, that's terrible. Must be terrible because he's a good soldier. I really didn't know him very well. I'd seen him, but he was actually my sergeant on the patrol. But he was on a different tank that I was on when they got us together.
Have you ever faced anything since World War II that created the fear that you felt? Or did you actually feel the fear?
I actually didn't have any fears. Only one time, I think, it was when I first got over there. And we got in a hedgerow country, and they start firing these 50 millimeter anti-aircraft automatic machine guns at us. And we were in a hedgerow. And you could hear the goddamn things going through the hedgerow. So you know what a hedgerow is. It's not like we have these little hedges here, you know. They're actually like scrub timber, you know. Well, some is, you know, some you can make a bow and arrow out of them, a bow rather. And they've been in there for years and years, you know. And the farmers, they plant them, and then they weave them together, you know, when they get long, and they're all wove together. Hell, sometimes a tank has a hell of a time going through them. But you could hear the bullets going through them. And I was hit the ground with a fellow next to me, and boy, he just shook like that, and pretty soon I was shaking. I thought, what the hell am I shaking about? But that was real early, and I had no experience whatsoever. They just mentioned that they were 50 millimeters, the kind they shoot at the planes.
Does it become a job then eventually?
Pardon?
Does it become a job eventually? How do you get rid of the fear so that you can survive for that amount of time over there?
Well, you're not in fear until you hear something, bullets flying near you, or a mortar dropped there close by or something, or you hear a buddy gets hit. Outside of that, I never really had any fear. I had fear enough that I would get out of harm's way, you know, and duck down or get behind something. But like I say, we didn't have too much of that. That little town where we had little fighting in the town where guys were run up the side of a building and throw a hand grenade up in the window of where they were at. Did that one time, and half the roof came down. Goddamn slate roofs, you know. Threw it up in a goddamn room and just blast. Pretty soon, good thing you had a little overhang on it, or I don't know how they got it. I was right up against the building. Well, things like that happen.
Did you have full respect and trust of your superior officers and the people you served with? Was that the feeling out there? I mean, because they're barking orders out to you and telling you to go here, or...
Didn't have none of that barking stuff. You never were in a group long enough, except when we were into a town, or if they got some prisoners, then they'd bring them up to me to question them. Well, hell, they didn't know no more about what was going on than we did. You know, but I'd question if there was any tanks back there or something like that. But that's about all. And see, you got to remember, war was coming to an end. They'd taken a hell of a beating in Russia by then. And actually, after the invasion, it was more or less we pushed them back, except that one last push they made at Bastogne. From there, more or less catch up. But no, you just sergeant in the morning, the word to get around, take off at sunrise, you know, so that you got daylight.
The prisoners that you took, were they mostly military, or were they civilians, or a combination?
No, I took three prisoners when we were fighting in the woods, you know. And they were fighting, oh, you didn't know what the hell, who was who, because it was starting to get dark. And in the woods, it was darker than it was outside. And two prisoners give up. I heard some shooting, and I was going along, and all of a sudden two guys appeared, their hands up, they gave up. And then I come over and I talked to them, and we all got down. I had nothing to shoot at. And then they told me there was another guy who wants to give up. So I told him I'll go get him. I wasn't going to go over. If he didn't want to give up when they did, I wasn't going to walk over there. So they went over and he came over. And I didn't know what the hell to do with him, you know, till things quieted down or something. So I just told him to get down. And they stayed down. Then we started walking. Well, I started walking, and the one prisoner told me, he said, "You're going the wrong way. You're going towards our line." Well, right away I got suspicious, you know. He told me I was going the wrong way, which I was. And those two guys I trusted right away, they came out. Then I heard them talking something in German, this last guy that came. And I didn't get all of it, but I heard him say from hinten. That means from the back. I surmised he was going to lay back or something and try to get me. So I told him, "You want to go free? Go ahead. Go ahead. Only I'll shoot your goddamn knees out. Then you can still be a German. You know, you want to go? Go ahead. If not, you're a prisoner." So he did. He stayed with me. And we finally got out. We found the road. And we crawled along the ditch And I could hear some guys talking, I could hear voices. And they were our boys. They had a couple of wounded there. The medics were working on them. So I told them to stay right there in the ditch. I didn't care if they took off or not, as far as I was concerned, in that situation. So I got across the ditch and I saw the medics and a couple of soldiers there and a couple of wounded. And I said, I'm going to go and bring 3 fellows across the road. Don't fire. Because the roads aren't paved there, but you walk on them like walking on concrete with them hard heels, you know. And I went over, then they come over. And then the next morning, then I took them over to battalion. And what they do with them, I don't know. They send them to a camp, I guess.
Did you have enough time to actually have a conversation with them? I mean, I know you spoke broken German.
I couldn't talk. I did with those 2. See, I try to repeat myself in half English and half German, and they knew some German, some English words that they had heard, but some they didn't know what the meaning was of, you know. And no, I couldn't. And I didn't know any. I didn't know any military words in German, you know. Oh, I know about captain and their lieutenants, but that's all I knew.
So you didn't. I mean, was this your first real kind of face-to-face contact with the Germans? I mean, that close?
That I had under my command, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a lot of that. Somebody else would get some prisoners and they'd bring them over to me and see what I could get out of it. And then usually then they'd tell me to take them to battalion.
Did you get the feeling they were just people like you were, or did you always feel like they're the enemy?
No, they were the same. I shot a young kid. I was crawling along the ditch. And then I went over and he was about gone. And I tried to help him, you know. But you can't do those things, you know, because you don't know what the hell's going on around you. And then one I think I told you about, I came back with the colonel. I had taken some prisoners back to the battalion, and he come back with me to my outfit to talk to our sergeants, I guess, or our lieutenant that we had. And we were in the woods, and there was a valley. Oh, I'd say about 150 foot we were above the valley. And there was a farmhouse about from here. Oh, where the road turns over here. You know where you're heading that way. About halfway from here to the clubhouse, looked to me. And a guy come out with 2 jerry cans. And over in a point there, we could hear a German tank running. So evidently he had fuel for the tank. And I actually didn't see him. The colonel says, "There's a target for you." And God damn it, he looks pretty far away, but it was actually closer because, you know, he said it was 700 yards, but I know I couldn't hit a bull in the ass from 700 yards. And I figured it was around 300, maybe 300. Because, you know, if you go down, take steps down, and then go out. And that's what it was, because the next day we went pretty close to that. It was around 300 yards. And I fired once, and he went down. He got up, I fired again. And he went down and stayed down. Then the next morning, one of the GIs come on, brought this prisoner over, say, here's the medic. No, he wanted me to get the medic for him. And so I talked to him, and his whole goddamn shoulder was blown out. Bad shape. I never did let him know, but I asked the fellow, I says, where'd you get him? He says, I don't know. He says, he came crawling into the woods. So I asked him, I says, were you the one carrying them cans across there? Or I let him know that I knew I had seen him carrying them cans. And he said, yeah. I didn't tell him that I was the one that hit him. They got a medic and they took him in. Oh, he'd live all right, but God damn it, that's because that.
When you met that one German prisoner, well, the one that you had shot at, did that make war hard all of a sudden? I mean, because all of a sudden you really...
It made me feel terrible. What made me feel terrible is I shouldn't have walked over there. But I didn't know what the hell was out on the other side of that ditch. I didn't walk over, I crawled over. No, that's... but, you know, you're in a different frame of mind. It's not like if it would happen now, you know, it'd be altogether different. You know, if you go out there and you hit somebody on an ordinary fight or something, it's different. I don't know. No, it didn't. The only fellow that I saw that broke down was that fellow on that patrol. The rest are all pretty good soldiers.
Do they prepare you for that, or is that a natural instinct?
No, I guess it must have been natural. No, they didn't prepare you. Hell, they told you, hell, they wanted you to. They didn't want you to get hit. They said, we don't want you to go out and get wounded, because then you're just a detriment to the Army. It says it takes 10 minutes to take care of a wounded person.
Is that in basic they tell you that?
Yeah, that's in basic.
Well, that's enough to kind of scare the hell out of you, isn't it? I mean, that's kind of their attitude, or makes you think seriously?
No, you should... you worry about yourself, you don't worry about them if you get hit. You know they're going to take good care of you. No, that's just something they say. Which is the truth, you know. Like if I'd went over there the first day and got hit, what the hell good was I to the Army, you know?
Did you make friends in the service?
Well, we buddied up. You always had a buddy. Well, he became your friends. But no, we never had much when we stopped, you know. When we stopped and got some rest. Oh, we had... Oh, I don't know. No, where I had a lot of fun was when after I went back to the outfit. And when I got back there, they were getting prepared to send him to South Pacific. They had all their khakis and everything, you know. And I thought, I was going to go to South Pacific. But, I just got there and I thought they're going to give me all those different clothing, And they called out names, and all you fellows would call out, you don't fall out in the morning. So then we were in a cigarette camp, where they called it cigarette camps. And we had to wait till they had a ship to send us home.
What's a cigarette camp?
Well, they called them cigarette camps because they named them Lucky Strike and Chesterfield and all different camps. That's where they kept the high pointers that were ready to go home. See? But it took months before we got home. If I would have stayed in England another 2 weeks, I would have been sent home, because then they had sent my outfit to South Pacific. Well, they were all ready to go on ship when they dropped the atomic bomb. So they changed their orders and sent them home. That was all the low pointers, the guys that came in last, They got a big welcome in Boston when they got home. Marlene Dietrich was on, and we saw pictures of Stars and Stripes.
So they sent the low pointers home first?
Well, they were sending them to South Pacific. But then when they dropped the bomb, they knew the war was over there. So they didn't want no more people over there. And they were all set and had the boat for them and everything, so they sent them home.
So where were you stuck?
We
were at the cigarette camp.
We were waiting to go home. See, they didn't have no ships to take us back. So many of us,
Well, that's not fair. You've done your duty, and now these low pointers get to go home. How long did you have to wait to get sent stateside?
About 4 months.
Wow. So you're reading the Stars and Stripes, and you're seeing newsprint reels.
Oh, that's when I got into a good deal. Yeah, so, they had to give you something to do. See. These cigarette camps were just like a regular army camp, Most of them were from the old First World War, the old cavalry camps. They made them called them cigarette camps. They had housing and barns and everything there that they made into housing. And they were always near a little city. They always made a headquarter building in the town. And there was always a big stockade there of German prisoners. But so then I was over there, and then they give these guys different jobs to do around the camp and stuff. And I got talking, and they asked me. No, he asked me. I didn't tell him. They asked me what I did when I was a civilian. I told them I was in the building trades. He said, "Oh, good." He says, "Can you build a theater?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, he says, "In one of these, make a theater or one of these barns." And I said, "Yeah, sure." So, see, the barns had been vacant since the First World War. And they were all cleaned out and everything. Oh, some had coal in them and stuff like that. So I picked out one that was fairly good shape. And they said, "We'll give you all the prisoners help you want." So every morning I'd go over and I'd get 4 or 5 prisoners, sometimes as high as 10. And we built benches, build a stage, and build a curtain that opened and shut, out of big canvas, painted them all, put a scenery on them, and real nice. Fixed it up real nice inside. And you're not Catholic, are you? I'm Catholic, so we got the 14 stations around the church. So I got 14 petty girls out of Esquire magazines, and I had two pretty good painters, two artists, pretty good. And they had the wall fixed nice, we put a nice frame around, and they put a petty gal on there and even leave some of the clothes off that they had on. And I got done one day, the chaplain came in, German priest he was, and because by then I had opened a laundry there and a tailor shop and everything for our officers and our little group, and had prisoners do all the work. And chaplain come up and he said, I was pretty well known. He said, Rudy, he says, can we hold church in your theater tomorrow morning? He didn't have to ask me, but that struck her so funny, And I says, I don't think you'd want to hold church in here. I says, oh, he says, I know. He says, you got the 14 stations up. See, he'd been there before. And I laughed. So we had church there every Sunday morning. And I told him, I said, I can drape them. He said, now, let the guys have their fun. Yeah, that was real good. And that was a special service outfit. They called it a special service outfit. And then they had guys, they had ball teams and all that. And they supplied them with the equipment, all sorts of things. And then when I got through with the church, they were going to send 10 fellas at a time, but they were from different camps into Switzerland. Make these tours, 10-day tours. And so I went with one officer, made the arrangements at the hotels and where they were going to stay, every stop, And one was going through Switzerland is like 3 areas, German, French, and Italian. So we were going through the German section. And that's up, going to Bern, and up Lake Zurich, Mount Jungfrau, and up in the mountains there. Beautiful. So we made all the arrangements. And then when the 10 guys went, I went with them. And that was nice. Then I made another tour with one of to the Italian outfit. That's where the big ski lodges and resort. What the hell? I just thought of it a minute ago. Well, anyway, through the French section. No, the Italian section. Down on it was San Moritz, I believe. But I didn't make that trip. I just went to Trump, made arrangements on lodgings.
So the war ends, and now you're running a tourist camp. It
Yeah,
sounds like.
Yeah, and then they had another one that went down to the French part. San Moritz was the Italian part, and the other one was on that famous beach they got in France.
Riviera. Was it Riviera?
Huh?
Riviera?
Riviera. I didn't go on that one, but the fellow that did go, They didn't even, they just got there. They just got there when they blew the ship up. The ship hit a mine. Of course, he was saved. They lost some people, I guess. But they cut out that tour then. Yeah, that was a lot of fun in there.
So you aren't too worried about getting home then at this point. I mean, the war.
Oh, I wanted to get home to the wife and kid, but there was nothing you could do until they called you. You just had to make up your mind. That was it.
So when you saw the newsreels showing, what was happening in New York, the ticker tape parades, and is that what you thought you were going to come home to?
Yeah, but when I got home, there wasn't a soul meeting the boat. And we got off the boat just as the whistles blew New Year's night. Oh, there was Salvation Army people with coffee and stuff like that. And some guy that loaded us up and took us to, I forget the name of the camp even. And there wasn't a soul in the damn camp. All them damn buildings were empty. And we had to go and they had the beds in them, but we had to carry the mattress and all that other stuff from the warehouse. This is 2 o'clock in the morning. So we'd have a place to lay down. Yeah, that's the welcome we had. But the main outfit, they had a good welcome. I had a picture in the Stars and Stripes, and Marlene was sitting there on the rail with her legs crossed. We all laughed about it. But those are orders, and that's... So when you're in the army like that, your life isn't your own, you don't know what the hell you're going to do tomorrow.
Do you remember the first time you saw your wife and your daughter after the war?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
What was that? Where and what was it like?
Well, see, it was wonderful. But they weren't waiting for me. I was released in California. And that couple of $100 they gave me, I bought an old Chevrolet. It was all rusted out. And I made another mistake there. I could have been discharged in Columbus or anywhere I wanted to, but I didn't know that till after I was out. See, and I didn't want to go back, and I could have went back, I guess, and changed it. But my brother was there in California then. He gave me a couple $100. I got this old Chevrolet, and I went down to pick him up in Ohio. Well, they were surprised when I came in. Of course, I talked to her on the phone. They knew I was going to arrive any minute that day. Oh, it was wonderful. My daughter seemed to grown quite a bit, Yeah, and then I went on back to California then.
Do you think your little daughter had the faintest idea what her daddy had been doing? I mean, she was pretty young, 7, 8 years old.
No, she wouldn't. She didn't remember. No, my wife was the youngest of 10 children. So she had a good time when she was there with her grandmother.
Do you remember any holidays while you were in the service, while you were overseas? A Christmas or Easter or anything like that?
No, I remember I had my Christmas turkey in Bastogne on the 28th of December. We rode 5 tanks into Bastogne. 5 men on a tank, I should say. And then we had to go back because the Germans got behind us. And then 3 days later, we come into Bastogne. And then I had After that, 15 days, and then I got hit. But those 15 days were hard too. That was all through heavy snow and woods. And Germans were going back, but you'd catch up to them. They had hauling their stuff with horses. They'd taken all the horses from the farmers and stuff. Their equipment was all gone. And then on the 15th, that was it.
Did you ever, they always talk about the USO shows and, different entertainers coming in visiting the troops. Did you ever experience any of that?
Yeah, I used to go into Reims, France. Of course, I think everything is canceled after 7 years. When I had this building, this theater, got real acquainted with the fellows there in the special services. So one day the sergeant from the PX he come over and he says, "How'd you like a load of whiskey?" Or booze, he called it. I said, "What's up?" He says, "Well, we got a chance to go and get 2.5-ton truck full of booze, whiskey, and champagne, wine." I said, "No, I don't want no part of it." And he says, "Well, what we want is we want to know if we could store it in one of these empty barns." So, by God, he talked me into it. And I said, "Okay." Or he explained everything. They had everything worked out. Beautiful. They had 2 MPs on their side, and the guy with a motor pool that was going to supply the truck, and everything was timed perfect. And they had the guy in the office that wrote out the requisitions, and they had a big officers' club there. We were in Mormelon, Le Grand, and Mormelon Petit was a little bigger, about 15 miles away. And they had a big officers' club there. And the officers used to get so much whiskey every month. Of course, after the war was over, they got a lot more. But we even got it up the line because when we had a fellow by the name of Green, Lieutenant Green, he'd get a bottle and he'd give it to me. He says, "Go split it among the guys," because I was the older one of the bunch, He wouldn't know. He knew I wouldn't drink it all myself. And he didn't want to drink it. So I did that. So I said, "Okay." And they said, "Okay." At about 11 o'clock, he says, "It'll be a 2.5-ton truck come in." I told them what barn to put it in. And they come in, unloaded it. They had a bunch of coal in there. And then they had some of these corrugated metal roofing, And we hid it behind the deal there. They took off. And there I was with all, and then that evening, they come over. They got a few bottles of booze, champagne mostly. And they had a hell of a party. I didn't stay. And I got the snoot full when I left them. And the next morning, shit hit the fan. Man, we had MPs coming from all these little different towns, because these officers all had their club in this one town, and they came from all of these other places where they were staying, And boy, he was a lieutenant colonel. He was really my top man at our headquarters. And he says, "Hey, Rudy, you know all these guys around here, all these other officers and everything bring their clothing in here to get tailored and stuff." He says, "If you hear anything, He says, we were hijacked. Boy, I tell you, talk about being scared in the war. That was one time I got a little scared. I was figuring about 10 years in the service. Behind bars. And I didn't know what how them guys when they had that party, how much talking they were going to do, you know. So I went up to the guy from the PX to run the PX. He was the main guy on it. And I says, what the hell? I said, let's get this damn thing out of here. Bury it or do something with it. Oh, no. He said, you can have it. You can have it. I said, I don't want it. So he said, I says, well, but I think I can get rid of it in a hurry. I says, you can get me a Jeep so I can go into Reims. I got a buddy there in heavy equipment. And I think he can get a truck and come and get it. So he did. I went and I got a hold of Pete. Pete Bonnet was his name. And I said, hey, Pete, you want a load of liquor? He said, yeah. What do you mean? Where are you going to get a load of liquor? I says, I got it. You can have it. All you got to do is bring a 2.5-ton truck over there. I says, then I told him the story, you know. And boy, we had a time perfect. 11 o'clock at night, I got rid of my prisoners. Theater was over with. I kept 2 of them to help us unload. Because I didn't know how many guys he was going to bring with him, see. But he brought 3 guys with him, so I really didn't need them. And boy, we run that stuff in just like on a, what the hell is, what they call this belt?
Conveyor belt?
Yeah, well, just like a conveyor belt, you know. Daisy chained it in. I kept a couple of bottles of Johnny Walker, I think, and a bottle of champagne. By God, they got away with it. But sure worried for a while. Boy, they kept coming around me. They figured if anybody knows anything around there, if anybody got it around there. But they figured, too, it could have been some other outfit, you know. But our outfit was the one that sent the requisition in, see. The guy made out a fake requisition. We got in there in the morning, and they were supposed to get their requisition filled at night, in the afternoon. He said, oh, they won't have no trouble. But they didn't get it. I suppose they got some afterwards, but after they found out it was hijacked.
That Army training paid off. How to work together as a team. Did the German prisoners that you worked with at the end of the war, what was it? Were they glad the war was over, or did they still think the war should be going on?
Well, I didn't have anything to do at the camp, you know, but oh yeah, they were anxious to get home. The ones I got. See, I'd go in and I'd tell the sergeant, I want 2 painters, a couple of carpenters, and a couple of handymen, you know. And he'd go out there and get on like a stage out there, and he'd holler out in German, saying, you want so this, that. Don't come if you're not qualified. Don't come, because you know they all want to get out of the deal. But it was marvelous to see that camp. You talk about Germans, I'll tell you, they got more ingenuity and more brains than any of the American soldiers. They had a camp. You wouldn't believe it. They dug a hole, maybe about so deep. And then they'd have a shelf where they could sit. Then they built their tent. They built a ditch all around each one of their tents for the water runoff. And man, they had them little tents in there, and that daggone nothing but earth, just fixed so nice you wouldn't believe it. Yeah, I took a walk through there one time to see how they lived. That one artist I had, he took me through there. Yeah, they were all anxious to get home. Oh, I don't know what the heck they were talking among themselves, or there were some diehards. But after you're defeated, there's no diehards left. But those that I had, they were all real nice fellows. I used to give them cigarettes once in a while.
I was going to say, were there certain things that they wanted to trade? You always hear the stories of the little kids that wanted chocolate bars. Were there things that the prisoners wanted to trade with you, and souvenirs that they wanted to get, or cigarettes?
All the guys I had, no, they didn't. I didn't have nothing to give. What the hell could I give them? Well, I had the clothes on my back. A few bucks I had nothing to give. Could have given my rifle.
What was your and it's kind of a different question, but what was your favorite part of being in the service?
When I was getting out, when I got in special services, when I built that theater, and those 3 months I had in there. Well, that was just like a vacation.
What was your least favorite part?
Pardon?
What was the least favorite part of being in the service?
Well, the fighting when you got action. You got action. The worst thing is when you saw your buddies get hit. We had one Chinese fella in our outfit. He carried that big radio on his back with a lieutenant. And I was, maybe 10 feet ahead of him. And the damn shell got him. That was terrible to see. But outside of that, I didn't have anything that was as rough as some of these movies I see, you know. Of course, in the movie, they're trying to put a whole year's action into $1.
And it's really not like that, is it?
Pardon?
It's not like that, is it? I mean, because you have a little fighting here and then a little fighting here.
Yeah.
I mean, which is serious, but...
Yeah. If the fighting stops, that means you're dead. Outside of it, they don't last that long.
Did you have, was your squad, your platoon, was it mixed race, or was it pretty? You talked about a Chinese gentleman that was an operator. Did you have African Americans? And
no, we didn't have no African Americans, but we had African Americans on truck drivers. Now I don't know about any other, but just the bunch I was with, the company, we had no blacks.
So it was pretty segregated then.
Oh yeah,
Just like being in the
but
South.
they had a lot of black truck drivers.
That was kind of the job they ended up with.
Yeah.
What about women in the service?
Well, I never, we didn't have any. I saw nurses, you know. And when I was in the States, when we had these WACs, you know, I don't know where they went. No, we didn't have any women.
So up on the front lines, up where you were, there
No.
weren't? Yeah.
No, none. No, not even. Well, we had the men nurses. They called them nurses too, I guess.
How about in Belgium? They had good-looking nurses in Belgium. Is that where you ended? No, you ended up in England when you were in there.
First, I went to Belgium in hospital. That's where they put the cast on.
How were the nurses in Belgium?
They were fine, very nice.
That must have scared the hell out of you when you saw amputee written on your.
Yeah, that kind of put me. I kind of felt bad.
Did the when you were in that ward where you were kind of the healthy one and you were helping all these other soldiers, did you talk a lot, or did they just kind of want to check things out of their mind, or?
No, we never talked much. All that. Mostly I had that one buddy with me all the way through, you know. And we went on a patrol a couple times. And when we get in these towns where we stay overnight, you know, and I'd get to see some of them because I'd find a room for them. And that's the only time I'd see the officers. And or when I took some prisoners back to battalion. But I was never even close to our officers. I was never ever close to them, except when we were riding them tanks. We got a new one. That was that Officer Green I was telling you. He was the second Louis then. And he come up, I guess they brought him up as far as where our tanks were, you know. And he had his duffel bag and all a bunch of gear, you know. It wasn't that he come up ready to go into the war, you know. And he come over to our tank. And of course, I was the first one to see him, and he asked me, I said, where do I go with all this stuff? And I said, well, I suppose you're supposed to go to battalion. I says, well, like I say, we had left our battalion. We were with the tankers, you know, that's a different battalions. And the guy in the tank then told him where to go. So he went back. Then I met him again, and I found out he was for our outfit.
That seems like that could get kind of confusing in battle as you're shifting around and knowing where you're supposed to go and what you're supposed to be doing, and
yeah,
everybody tells you something different.
Yeah, well, he probably had his assignment for to be officer of battalion so-and-so, and company so-and-so, and that's what he was asking about. Well, company so-and-so wasn't there anymore. They were on the tanks. So that's how he got followed up.
Did it take a long time to, I assume in boot camp they tell you who you're supposed to salute and how you're supposed to salute, and you learn all that protocol stuff, or?
Oh, we didn't salute anybody.
Is that right?
No. See, the officers kept their stripes on the back of their helmet. They didn't wear their eagle, or a lieutenant had a stripe and the captain had two stripes and so on. But they had it on the back of their helmet.
I'm going to stop for just a second. I'm going to everything like
Yeah,
that.
your grandson probably never heard about the 14 Stations of the Cross in the theater that you did.
Yeah, did you tell your grandson that story?
No.
In fact, speaking of your grandson, and this is kind of a lot of what we're working on this project for, is looking ahead to great-great-grandchildren that you'll never meet, that I'll never meet. Do you think that there's a message for them from World War II?
Well, I don't know. These younger, they forget so quick, you know. There's too much action. They got too much action now. It's not like when I was a kid. Because these kids at 15 do more stuff than when I was 20.
But they've never gone to protect our country. I mean, I've never had to face that, and your grandchild will probably never have to face that. Your great-great-grandchildren hopefully will never have to face that. But
No, I hope not. Well, there won't be no infantry wars anymore. None at all. Oh, they might go in to clean up, but it's going to be all air for a while. And if that don't do it, it'll be chemicals.
Yeah.
That's the big one. That's the worst one. That's worse than the atomic bomb, chemicals.
Are you proud of your time that you served?
Well, I think I done my job. I think more of the Good Conduct Medal than I do of the Purple Heart. No, the only thing that really teed me off with the Army was I couldn't make sergeant, or I couldn't advance in the damn service. Because I was, like I say, I was a bastard. Every time one sergeant would get hit and we'd lose him, then they'd take somebody else out of the company that was formed here in the States, A couple times when they didn't have one, they'd say, well, we'll make you field sergeant. But they never did. That's the only thing I really had against them. Because I was always there when they wanted to wake me up to question a prisoner or something, or where the other guys were sleeping when I was going around making places for them to sleep and stuff. Not that I wanted the honor of being a sergeant, I wanted the money. I'll be frank with you. I had a wife and a daughter.
Yeah, and you just come out of the Depression, and you were raising your family. I understand that. But you were once you got into the service, you were a very dedicated soldier. It sounds
Oh
like.
yeah, well, I even volunteered for the paratroopers. If I didn't want to if I had to go in, I wanted to go in with a good frame of mind. No, I didn't want to do anything to get out of it. I was just it was my fault actually that I got in it. Let's put it that way.
Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor being attacked?
Yeah, I was in a cigarette camp. Oh, Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
No, that was on a Sunday morning. Yeah. I think we were going to church. I'm not sure. Yeah, it was around 11, 12 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I heard a lot about what was going on there. I had a very, very good friend that was stationed there when it happened. In fact, he married one of the widows. Yeah, and he said it was terrible. Just that he was in the Air Corps. So they didn't catch much hell. He says, but boy, it was hell to see that. They couldn't do nothing about it. Yeah, and they had a bunch of a lot of Japs in Hawaii anyway. I think the majority of the people are Japs there. And he was telling me how they got one fellow used to come around every day with sandwiches and things, in a little truck. And he says when he got over at the field, he says, what the hell is that guy doing? And he was ramming the tails of the planes that were sitting there. Before somebody, minutes, you think it's only a minute, but it's a long time. And he said it took forever to get somebody out there to stop him. Because he didn't have no gun on him or nothing.
Did you know that that was going to change your life when Pearl Harbor had been attacked? Did you?
No, I didn't think at all. No, I always thought that I wasn't going to get called to go into service. I had made up my mind I wasn't going to get called. And I wouldn't have got called if I'd have just shut my mouth. But like I say, I didn't want to do anything to get out of it, because he said if you leave the town or something like that, why, you're supposed to go and tell them you moved, which I did. No, that part, I don't. The only thing I blame him for is the political part of it. I still should have been drafted when my number came up. But they weren't taking anybody that had children and married.
Did your brother go in?
No.
So were you the only child of your family to go in?
Yeah. Well, my two brothers were too old.
That's right.
See, I was 32 then. And then I got a sister between me and the next brother. So there was about 7 more years there. No, my brother got a good job at Lockheed, camouflaging the buildings and stuff. Of course, we never got hit over here.
What's it mean to you, or what do you feel when you see the American flag, whether it be in a parade? Or...
Oh, I'm very proud of it. Very, very proud of it. Oh, it isn't the flag. What I'm against is the political way that I was inducted. See what I mean? Had nothing to do with the soldiers or the army or anything. It was the way the policy was set up, and they didn't live up to their own policy.
Those ever-changing rules.
Yeah.
The catch-22s.
Well, it's just like a lot of bills pass out of Congress. They're real good. They're real good. But it's administration that follows it up.
Do you think that yourself and the people that served with you would be classified as heroes? That you fit in that classification for what you did?
As what?
As heroes?
Well, I don't know. I don't think a hero is made by himself. He's just at the right place at the right time. That's his own reaction.
Did you realize at the time that you were a part of history? I mean, I hear you talk about Saint-Lô and Bastion and the Rhine River, the places that you were, that when I read a history book now, these were crucial pieces of history and what helped keep America free. Did you realize at the time that this was history happening?
I didn't get exactly what you meant.
Well, when you were fighting and you were over in Europe, did you realize that you were a part of history, or was it just you were just doing your job?
Oh, I knew it was part of my life. I mean, I didn't know maybe I'd go and do another war. It's just part of life. And very proud to be in the country I was in to go. I would have hated to have been a German over there and get inducted. Of course, if I was in Germany at that time, I'd probably been proud to be their soldier too, as their men were.
See, and that's what I think. I mean, take away the top brass and look at the average soldiers, and I think that you're exactly right. There were young German soldiers that were fighting for what they thought was right, and you were fighting for what...
And there was a lot of them that were brainwashed, which ours weren't. You know, that SS outfit they had, that was something terrible. Well, they're probably no much worse than our what do they call them now? Like the Green Berets and different divisions they have, you know, that they're like the FBI. You don't know what the hell goes on.
Did you ever, in any of the prisoners you captured, did you ever face any of the SS?
No, no. We captured one, but I wasn't instrumental in it at all. It was in Nancy, France, when I was on that deal. They got 5 SS men they captured, but they were in American uniforms.
They were out for a little R&R on their own, huh?
Yeah, they had their own R&R. Yeah, I don't know how they got caught or anything, but I know they caught them. The story was in the bar room where I was at, and it just happened the day before. And we got orders and be careful that they don't know how many of them is around.
Well, thank you very much. That wasn't too bad, was it?
No.